Have you ever wondered if it's possible to turn Germany into the ultimate survival bunker? Well, I have, and today is the day that I tested just that. Today, I determined whether or not it's possible to conquer the entirety of Europe by turning Germany into the ultimate fortress. Stay tuned to the end to see just how successful this challenge ends up being. Or unsuccessful in some cases. But now, the question you're all asking yourselves is, how are we actually going to turn Germany into the ultimate survival bunker? Well, here is the plan. First, we must industrialise to ensure we can outproduce every other nation on the planet, because we're going to need lots of planes, lots of guns, lots of trucks, lots of tanks, lots of everything. Then, we need to take out Austria along with Czechoslovakia through the focus tree. Then, we trade Slovakia for Danzig so that I can hold on to Königsberg. And finally, we're going to build tons of land forts, coastal forts, anti-air, and everything that's going to make me an impenetrable fortress. Is this plan foolproof? Absolutely not, but it's the best I could think of on a very short schedule. So, without further ado, let's dive right into it. Similar to my last challenge run as Germany, I first began the conquest with research into my industry, along with the construction of both civilian and military factories in the west of the country. Regarding my economy, I chose to go down the prioritised economic growth pathway, and the reason for this is simple. Since I'm becoming a bunker, I will not be actively trying to capitulate nations, and would therefore be unable to seize their gold reserves, so I would be unable to mitigate the effects of the MEFO bills. And if you don't mitigate the effects of the MEFO bills, you won't be able to build anything, as we found out in the last challenge run. Moving to Iberia now, and as usual, Spain had descended into civil war once more. So, I chose to send over 2 tank divisions, and this time round, the Republicans stood absolutely no chance against my German might. Okay, in all seriousness, what are the actual chances of this happening 2 runs in a row on non-historical? Because that is twice now that Austria-Hungary has taken 20 to 30% of my industry away from me. And do you know what's worse? There was a river in Austria that I wanted to hold on to and use as a defensive line, but I guess not anymore. Oh, it is genuinely just so annoying when the AI tries to be creative. I know it's non-historical, I know they're allowed to be creative, but I don't want them to be creative at my detriment. Okay guys, it's now time for me to tell you where exactly I will be holding these front lines. So, I will have a front line along the Eder River, the Oder River, the Danube, and along the original borders Germany has in the west. And now, you may be thinking, these front lines are the most important part of this defence, but no. The most important part of this defence is going to be the secondary lines, which are going to be located a couple tiles behind these front lines. And the reason for these secondary lines will be to provide assistance to battles that I'm losing on the main front lines, in an attempt to mitigate against the fact that I may lose a few tiles. It is now time to put my theories into practice. So, I am now at war with every nation, but before I outline how the defence went, I want all of you to type in the comments as to whether or not the front lines will collapse, and if they do collapse, which one will collapse first. And since you're already down in the comments section, you might as well drop a like and a follow as well. Doesn't hurt you, helps me a lot, it's a win-win really. Now then, the moment you've all been waiting for, the defence. Almost immediately, I completely lost air superiority in 2 out of the 3 air zones in Germany, which you would think is really bad. However, I have a humongous brain, so I maxed out the anti-air in every province, so this issue was vastly mitigated. Also, the front lines were holding incredibly well. Every battle was green, and the occasional red battles were quickly remedied through the use of my secondary lines, because my secondary lines were made out of tanks. Because I was thinking to myself, if we're losing a battle, infantry's not enough, let's use tanks instead. And things were going really well for the first half of the defence, because very quickly, and I'll explain why later, we did start losing quite a few battles despite the secondary lines. Now, did you guess correctly in the comments? Because the first front line to collapse was the Dutch front line. Now, I personally wouldn't have guessed this to be the case, because I thought the Sudeten front line would collapse first, because there was loads of plains, no river, and, well, Austria-Hungary looked quite scary to me. But that was not the case. And so the question now is, why did this front line collapse? Well, my best guess is that the battles on this front line were simply occurring so frequently that both my primary and secondary line ran out of organisation, which is something I didn't actually plan for. And another reason, just like with the Sudetenland, is probably due to the lack of a large river, an excess number of plains tiles, and the AI using a surprising amount of medium tanks. All in all, even though we'd only lost one tile, I could already sense that I don't think this was going to be a conquest that would be successful. And my senses were unfortunately right. Once the allied nations had got some momentum behind their push, I very quickly ran out of both options and defendable positions. However, I still had one last trick up my sleeve. I don't know what the river is called, but I set up my fallback lines along it, and with a heavy heart I gave up a large portion of Western Germany, a large portion of my industrialised district. If this play worked, the run would be saved. If it failed, my capitulation was nigh on certain. My plan had failed. Before I could even get all my armies in the correct positions, the Allied armies had crossed the river. Without this river, and now in enemy-controlled airspaces, I was quickly pushed back, causing my capitulation. The only positive from this conquest was that I didn't lose a single northern or southern province that I intended to hold on to, and that was thanks to the rivers. My only downfall was the west, and eventually the east, when I had to relocate men to slow down the west. The only thing left to say was, what kind of peace deal was this? I had killed 8.5 million allied troops, and they only killed 1 million of my troops, yet they still let me keep all of my industry and about 80% of my land. The only thing they really cared about was whether I was democratic or not. Man, I really do not understand the AI. They let me keep all of my manpower and industry, and all of the stockpiles of equipment that I had got up during the war. So if I really wanted to, I could just go to war with them again. Nothing was different, because my fortifications were still around, my anti-air was still around. I could go for round 2 if I wanted to. On a more serious note, however, what went well, and even better if. The things that went well were the templates I used, such as the infantry template, which was a 9-4 infantry plus artillery division. And an even better if would probably be to have started the defensive line on the rivers, and to have never industrialised the west. I could also have possibly used the motorised infantry from my last challenge run, as they had incredibly high organisation, so would have probably done better against the continued fighting that happened. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video, where I will let a wheel control my Hearts of Iron 4 campaign as Germany.